Welcome to rSlash where people always do what they're told. Many years ago, more than 15, I worked as a programmer for an oil and gas automation company. This means we would design and build the computer systems for oil and gas plants, commission them, and support the operators during day-to-day operations. Because of this, my company ran a 24/7 support phone. Every week, a member of my team would get the phone and expect it to be available to answer calls 24/7. We had enough people on the team that it would roughly equate to getting the phone twice a year. Most of the employees of this company were salaried, and the 24/7 phone was written into their contract. For every phone call they took, they could charge a minimum of 1 hour in bank time. This was a good deal for them and made the 24/7 phone easier to handle. I was a little different than my coworkers in that I wasn't a salaried employee. I was an hourly contractor. My coworkers would bank their time, but I was just paid out bi-weekly. My contract also stated that if I was being paid by the company, I had to be available exclusively to the company. This was added by their HR department because a few years before, they caught an hourly contractor running side jobs for other businesses at his desk. This also meant that if they wanted me to be available exclusively to the company, they had to pay for my time. For 2 years, I knew the 24/7 phone existed, but had never had to take it because, according to my contract, if they wanted me to be available, they had to pay my hourly rate after normal work hours to ensure that I was available to answer the phone when it rang. Then, as in most corporate stories, my completely awesome manager left for greener pastures and was replaced with an absolute tool. After a month of being in the office, he decided it wasn't fair that everyone took turns on the phone except for me. He declared that I would be put in rotation effective immediately. I didn't want to cost the company a ton of money, so I tried to explain that if I'm on the 24/7 phone, that means they have to pay me 24 hours a day for 7 days. He scoffed and told me I obviously didn't understand how business worked. I told him he didn't understand how my contract was laid out and that I'm an hourly contractor, not a salaried employee. He insisted that to be a team player, I had better take the phone or look elsewhere for employment. I didn't want to seem like I wasn't a team player, so I accepted the phone and started my clock. 7 days later, I handed the phone off to the next guy and submitted my bi-weekly invoice. It came out to just over $10,000, with $8,400 being just that 1 week of having the phone. I waited about 15 minutes before I was pulled into the manager's office. When I arrived, the manager, the head of HR, and the manager's boss, the head of the department, were there with my most recent invoice sitting on the desk. The department head just looked at me and asked what the heck I was thinking when I gave them that invoice. I explained that the new manager insisted I take the 24/7 phone even though my contract clearly stipulates that if the company wants me available 24/7, they have to pay me for every minute I have the phone. The new manager became redder with every word. When I was finished, the department manager turned to him and asked him why he didn't know this, since it's common knowledge that no contractors are ever put in that kind of position. As he was stuttering for an answer, the department head dismissed me and told me to expect my check at the usual time. The best part, during the entire week I had the 24/7 phone, it only rang twice. Both during work hours and both calls asking for a specific person in the department. All I had to do was give them a phone number. Those 3-minute phone calls cost that company $4,200 each. After that, the new manager pretended I didn't exist and refused to talk to me for 3 months until he was moved to sales in a different department. I was at the company for another 2 years and never saw that phone again. Honestly, that's too bad, OP, because $4,000 for 3 minutes of work is a dream job. For those curious, that comes out to $1,400 per minute or 23 bucks per second. And also, we had this awesome contribution from Kylearean down in the comments. Back in the late 90s, I worked for a NASA field experiment in the remote Amazon jungle. We had a satellite phone for which we were never instructed on when or how much to use it. Initially, it was used for contacting other researchers at other sites and for occasional calls to the US. I discovered it could also serve as a passable dial-up connection, so we started using it to check email, surf the web, etc. Also, during this time, Age of Empires 2 was popular, so I used the sat phone to play multiplayer. After 2 weeks of this, we get an angry visit from a supervisor who explicitly drove out from a nearby city to yell at us. Turns out, the data mode on the phone was much more expensive than voice, and we, mostly me, had racked up $40,000 in charges. Being a lowly graduate student, I didn't get in any trouble, and I think they were able to pay reduced charges. The officials who were in charge back then still give me a hard time about it 20 years later. Our next Reddit post is from Captain P42. This happened a few years ago. I was working at a large national chain restaurant as a manager. I was asked to temporarily reassign to a location in a city about an hour away, and accepted. They put me up in a hotel, the whole 9 yards. The first weekend I was there, I discovered that the general manager had screwed up and not ordered any change. That is, small bills and rolls of coin for the safe, and that the local branch of our bank would be closing in the next hour. I also happened to have a personal account at the same bank and had, in the past, gone and gotten change from the branch back home. Since time was tight, I quickly looked up the address of the bank, grabbed $800 and jumped in my car. I get to the bank, wait in line, and then ask them to make change. $405 bills, $301 bills, and 100 in assorted rolled coins. The teller tells me that the bank doesn't make change. Me, thinking it was because they didn't know me, informed her that our restaurant had an account she could look up. She then told me, "No, we don't make change at all." The thought going through my brain was, WTF, you're a bank. I tried explaining the situation, but was quickly shot down. I left, went back to my car, then had an idea. I went back inside the bank with my personal checkbook, got to the front of the line, and luckily had the same teller. Before she could even greet me, I held out my checkbook and told her, I would like to close this account since this bank is no longer customer service oriented. She kind of rolled her eyes, but went about my request. Then she asked how I wanted my cash back. An automatic response, I'm sure, and one I was counting on. I said 405s, 301s, 70 enrolled quarters, 25 enrolled dimes, 4 enrolled nickels, and 1 enrolled pennies. The rest can be on a cashier's check. No reason for her to deny it, so I got my change. And the following Monday I returned, closed out the other 2 accounts I had there, and I opened accounts at a different bank where I've been banking ever since. And if you think that was bad, Cheese and Onions posts a very similar story down in the comments. And it sounds like a totally made up Facebook post, but this story is actually 100% true. The Washington Post even wrote an article about it. A guy goes into a bank and needs to talk to the bank manager for a very specific transaction. The bank manager isn't there, so the guy asks the teller to validate his parking. The teller tells him that she can't validate his parking because he didn't make a transaction. He goes to the bank across the street and opened up an account. Then he goes back to the original bank and asks for his entire account of millions of dollars to be transferred into the new bank and to shut down his old account. After losing all that money, the teller validated his parking. Somebody got fired. Our next Reddit post is from PM Your Piercings. Despite working in a high-stress, high-tech sales role, I believe that when you're on vacation, paid time off, you don't work and disconnect. Whenever I was on paid time off and my manager would request something from me, I would email, "Are you asking me to work on my time off?" The answer was always something like, "Yes, I really need this done." After I worked, I would reclaim the vacation time in our employee portal. I saved every email. Last week, HR launched a new portal that allows us to see vacation time, sick time, etc. My vacation time balance was about 2 weeks short. When I alerted HR to it, they said that they took back a chunk of time I had reclaimed because they felt I was abusing the system. Then I sent them every email from my manager asking me to work, documenting that it truly wasn't time off. I also included a link to the state law stating that even a minute worked in the day counted as a full day. I'm salaried. My PTO balance was quickly returned. Our next Reddit post is from emaren. 5 years ago, I was hit by a car while riding my bicycle. The driver turned across the front of me, pretty much into me, and I had absolutely nowhere to go. I hit the passenger door of the car, then tumbled over the front of the car, still clipped into my pedals, taking it with me. The car was pretty damaged. I dented the door, scratched the paint in many places, ripped the door mirror off, smashed the glass, cracked the windshield, and dented and scratched the hood. My bicycle emerged fairly well. I think I broke its fall mostly. The front wheel was bent, the saddle torn, and the pedals and bar tape damaged from hitting the road. I broke my collarbone and lost a lot of skin in various places that hit the road. I trashed my helmet and my shorts too. The driver said, "Sorry mate, I didn't see you," which was pretty obvious. The car was his daughter's and he was taking his grandson out for ice cream. The poor little boy got covered in glass from the door window that exploded inwards when I hit it, but seemed to be okay. The driver gave me his phone number, and I took a photo of his driving license and insurance details, along with a pile of photos at the scene. Crucially, I got the details of 2 witnesses too before I passed out from the pain. This all happened on a Friday. I got patched up at the hospital, and my partner was able to get my bike home. Because of my broken collarbone, I was in a huge amount of pain while the doctors tried to figure out if it needed to be pinned or not over the weekend. On the Saturday morning, I called the driver and his phone went straight to voicemail. I'd taken a good look at my bike and figured it needed about 350 pounds of parts: wheel, forks, saddle, new bar tape, etc. And something for my cracked phone screen. I guessed 150 pounds. On the message I left him, I said I wasn't sure if he wanted to pay for the parts or go through his insurance. His daughter called me back and shouted and swore at me for damaging her car. I explained that he turned across the front of me and it was his poor driving to blame. I mentioned that I was sitting on my sofa with a broken collarbone as a result of him, and all I wanted was to get my bike fixed. "You will never get a penny from me. Talk to the police if you want to. We will tell them that it wasn't my car. You will never get a penny from us." Okay, I can comply with that. I called the local police station and they sent a constable down to see me. I carefully explained what had happened and showed him the photos from the scene. The damage to my bicycle, phone, helmet, and shorts. Gave him the details of the witness and several cups of tea, and he advised me to get a lawyer on the case too, so I did just that. My bicycle insurance has legal aid cover, so I used it. Long story short, I had 3 surgeries on my shoulder over the next 18 months or so. The insurance details that the driver gave me was fake. The daughter's insurance company didn't cover her father as a driver. The driver had 6 points on his license already, but crucially, the police found he had insurance with a company that did cover him on her car, but only for third-party cover. He only admitted this when they threatened to charge him with driving without insurance and documentation fraud. The police eventually convicted him and gave him enough points to ban him for driving for a year and fined him £1,500 plus costs. The insurance company that he was with was one of those that only covers really bad drivers. Obviously, they didn't pay out for the damage to the car. This was probably another £1,500 or more. The insurance company paid for my bicycle damage, £550 once assessed by a local shop. They also paid for my clothing and helmet, £200, and my phone screen, £180. Then, finally, the insurance company paid compensation for my injuries and time off, etc. Which OP doesn't give the exact number for, but it's in the 5-figure range. So between £10,000 and £90,000. I would have been quite happy for them to pay for my initial assessment of my bicycle and phone damage. But as they wanted to make my life difficult, it cost them thousands. Got the driver banned, and the resulting compensation was a massive bonus for my savings account. OP really should have recorded that phone call for evidence. How dare you damage my car when we ran over you? You are such an inconsiderate, selfish pedestrian. Our next Reddit post is from Jumboface. This is a story of my mother's. She has always been incredibly hard-headed, but this sticks out a lot from my teenage years. Once a year, she always had us pull everything out of the garage. Lots of boxes. My mom has a concerning amount of possessions, so we could go through it and clean and reorganize. This particular year, the couple who owned the house across from us, house flippers, were in the process of selling their house. Unhappy with my mother's unsightly driveway covered in boxes soiling their good image, they made a call to the HOA. By the time my mother received the letter, the mess had been put away, but they decided to get on her for a few other complaints, such as the bikes against the side of the house and the patchy gravel. She had 2 weeks to get everything up to standards. Petty and easily frustrated, my mother knew immediately who called, since the couple had come over and told her flat out that with their renovations, they were selling that house for way more for any other house in this neighborhood and would appreciate if she respected that by keeping her property on par. For the next 2 weeks, every box from that garage was in our driveway. The couch and the living room TV came next. This was early summer, so it was perfect weather to sit in your yard in your short shorts and sports bra. My mom made sure to wave and smile every time they brought someone over for a showing. The final step came at the end of that 2 weeks though. After the yard had been cleaned up and cleared by the HOA, my mom went to the local Walmart and bought a for sale sign. She wrote about 1/4 of their ridiculous asking price on it and finished off with a big "sold" written across the front and stuck it in our yard. No clue what they ended up selling their house for, but it sat empty for a while, so I'd assume it was below offer. That was r/Maliciouscompliance, and if you like this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit videos.